Don't forget to save your memories of me too.
You can't save memories even on that system of yours. Memories are fragile things. After you reduce them to binary numbers and send them through the air, they're not memories anymore.
I wouldn't be so sure of that. There's nothing my system can't do.
Memories aren't just sounds and pictures. They exist somewhere between the sounds, between the pictures.
I don't get it. Anything can be done digitally.
If that's true, why don't you go ahead and try to save what I'm thinking right now?
I can't save that type of thing. You have to put it into words at least.
That's right. And that's what memories are. Wordless.
What makes Metal Gear Solid special? Specifically the first game in the franchise. Metal Gear Solid was a tactical espionage action game, which was stealth mixed with action, and it was unique because it dropped you into situations behind enemy lines with no backup and very limited resources. Nate and I are going to talk about Metal Gear Solid today, like I said before, the first game. Be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this and subscribe for more content. We have a lot of what makes it special videos on the channel, which I personally think are some of our best, but least viewed. But they allow us to talk about franchises that we're, passionate for that are not time sensitive.
Now, there was 2 Metal Gear games before this, but the Metal Gear Solid was really the first one in the series that I believe revolutionized the stealth franchise in gaming. There really was not much games before this in that genre, and this one was really the first big one.
Yeah.
And it also included a lot of unheard of stealth mechanics at the time that would go on to create a different other franchises in the stealth genre, like Splinter Cells later on, and I know tried to use some of the same elements from this series, but this one really was the first one that actually featured a lot of those different mechanics.
Yeah, it's interesting because it sort of worked as a proof of concept for stealth games in general, because there's a lot to the development of this game that we'll actually get into, which Hideo Kojima had to fight for. This game was directed by Hideo Kojima. For me, he's one of my favorite game developers just in general. Nate really ragged on me because half of the script is about Hideo Kojima, which I will admit, but it's very obvious that this game would not have been made without him. When we look at some of his comments on the game, actually as well, he was talking about it in different interviews. He had said that in regards to how the Metal Gear series was actually created, now Metal Gear, it's important to note, like Nate said, there were 2 Metal Gear games before Solid. Metal Gear and Metal Gear Solid Snake. Those were 2 different games created originally before Metal Gear Solid was essentially the 3rd entry, but it was the first in the Solid series. So I know that's a little confusing, but it's important to note. Solid is also where the story started to get very important. Essentially, you had to kind of play from Solid on. You could have skipped Metal Gear and Metal Gear 2, Solid Snake. If you skip Metal Gear Solid or 2 or whatever, this franchise is not going to make any sense to you, which is a strength and a negative to it. But in regards to how it was made, Hideo Kojima said that Lost World was the first project I was assigned to, and the game was canceled after 6 months. It was a serious blow to all of us on the team. I couldn't believe it. After that, I began to work on Metal Gear. Konami wanted a war game because they were incredibly popular at the time, but I didn't want to make the same game as everyone else. So I started thinking of ways in which I could subvert the genre. Now, what he was talking about the development of the game as well, with how much convincing it actually took with Konami and even his own team to make this game, saying, I had such a hard time convincing people. I had so many things going against me at that time. For one, my first game had been canceled, so I hadn't released anything yet. Then I was working in quite a large creative group, and I was the youngest. Finally, the type of game I wanted to make didn't exist at that time. The odds were stacked against me, and it was very hard to earn the trust of the team. Now, it's interesting to note that because of this, because of these issues, and because of even other developers on the team almost borderline going against him for quite a while during the active development of the original Metal Gear before Solid, which would lead up to, Solid's development years later, he actually implemented a lot of different tools and safeguards to give him creative control over the game's directions going forward after the original Metal Gear game, without having to butt heads with other developers on the team. Now, this is all important because this did eventually lead to the birth of Metal Gear Solid, which was essentially Metal Gear, but in 3D. Again, revolutionizing the stealth genre even further. Before he showed them, we can do this with sprite-based graphics, pixels, all this stuff, but now we can do it in 3D. So he didn't only revolutionize stealth once, but twice, which I think is very fascinating.
Yeah, that is pretty interesting. It's, in the gaming world, it's tough to strike gold, but he did it twice with the same franchise.
Yeah,
So-
and he became so integral to it. You
Yeah.
know, even after his departure from Konami eventually, which is a whole nother can of worms that we're not going to get too far into here, the question was left of what is Metal Gear without Hideo Kojima? He was so intricately tied into this franchise.
Yeah, it's important to note that he was very story-based with his games. He wanted his games not just to be a stealth game, but he wanted them to be more of a story game, and you see that a lot with Metal Gear Solid. Which is why, like you said, when he left Konami, they were like, well, what do we do? Because Kojima was the guy behind these games. Like, he was the reason they were great.
He was the George Lucas to their Star Wars, and without him,
Right.
they would have to make Metal Gear great again.
Exactly.
Which is a tough task to fulfill.
Tough to live up to those standards. Well, so anyways, the game was clearly inspired by an 80s action movie. It's a movie called Escape from New York, and then there's also Escape from LA. There was the main character called Snake. Well, anyways, so he was heavily based off this character, and it also featured a lot of political current events at the time, which I find kind of interesting because if you play Metal Gear Solid, it's heavily based off of current events with like nukes, political warfare, even like American government structure. It's really interesting, and like he ties in a lot of different factors from not just Japan, but around the world.
Yeah, I would have almost guessed, not knowing who made this, I would have actually guessed this was an American game at first, because this game seems to understand the intricacies of America
Right.
very well. It's just fascinating how you had a game created by a Japanese game developer in Japan that seemed to understand America better than a lot of American video games at the time, partially because those games didn't really want to understand America. They didn't have tons to say underneath. There were games with heavy messaging at this time, like, Final Fantasy VII with things like politics and the destruction of the world with the ecosystem and, pollution and all this stuff, right? Obviously. But,
And the game Treasure Planet.
absolutely. The game Treasure Planet,
Very
about
integral.
the dangers of what would happen if man and planet made of treasure combined.
Right. Very important.
Yeah, very important themes. But, it's just interesting that this game had a story to divulge. And speaking of what you talked about with Snake Plissken, it's interesting how actually they almost got sued for that, because Hideo Kojima, it was obvious that this game was a direct result of the passion of him for not only films and the action-oriented vibes of the 80s and 90s, but also his desire to actually make a game that was unique from everything else out there, stating that he wanted to make the best game on the PlayStation console. However, because of Snake Plissken and Solid Snake being very clearly tied together, along with Hideo Kojima openly admitting that he was very inspired by Escape from New York, something that you often don't do because of opening yourself to issues like this.
Right.
There actually was going to be an attempt by a rights holder of the film Escape from New York to sue Konami over Metal Gear Solid. However, John Carpenter actually got involved with that since he had directed Escape from New York and straight up told them basically don't sue him. He said, I know the director of those games and he's a nice guy, or at least he's very nice to me. He kind of got in the middle and said like, hey, listen, why don't you just leave him alone?
Right.
I don't think that lawsuit would have really gone anywhere personally anyway. I think it was a reach, kind of like a lot of the lawsuits we've seen around GTA 5 over the years of like, this character looks like me, or, oh, this character walks on 2 feet and I do too, so I'm going to sue Rockstar.
Wasn't that Selena Gomez that tried doing
No,
that?
there was Lindsay Lohan.
Oh, Lindsay Lohan, that's who it was. Yeah,
there was a Lindsay
yeah.
Lohan suit, and there were some other ones as well.
Yeah.
About GTA 5. I think that this would have been a reach because, honestly, inspiration is very different from just straight up stealing something.
Yeah.
And the story from Escape from New York is extremely different from the story of Metal Gear Solid and everything.
Yeah.
So I think that wouldn't have worked. But it is interesting to know that Hideo Kojima was so, I guess, not idolized, but respected in terms of media that even another developer would try and defend him from a potential lawsuit.
Wow, Snake! You're like an action movie star. Totally different.
Huh?
This is real, not some prearranged stunt. If I screw up, there are no retakes.
Yeah, I guess you're right.
So the point of all of this, obviously, is that it's just a passion project of Hideo Kojima, like we talked about. And because he wanted to make this best game on the PlayStation console, Snake would go on to become a mascot for the PlayStation brand, which I think, Nate, you pointed out is interesting because of the releases of other games, the Metal Gear games on other systems or lack thereof.
He'd be a mascot for PlayStation, except for what's interesting is some games got released on the Xbox. Actually, a lot of them did. But even games got released on Nintendo, which I find very interesting. Like there was Twin Snakes, which is an exclusive GameCube release of this franchise. And then also there was the little-known game on the 3DS called Snake Eater 3D. So that's the only games that ever came out on Nintendo. Now, yes, the two original Metal Gear games did come out on the NES. Before, like, the actually guy points that out. Yes, they did come out on the NES.
Yeah, but they were more designed for the MSX computer, first
right.
off. And secondly, the only solid games to come out for Nintendo were Twin Snakes, which is a remake, more in almost an anime-ish vibe style, and Snake Eater 3D, which is just essentially a port of Metal Gear Solid 3.
Right. And I find that interesting because he is a mascot for PlayStation, but he even came to stuff like Smash Bros, which I find very interesting because he only had 2 games on the GameCube, and neither of them were very, like, mainstream games, if you will. So I think that really just talks about how important this guy is to gaming in general.
You know what's interesting, too? Do you know the story behind... It's very brief, but do you know the story behind how Snake actually came to Smash Bros? As a Kojima stan here. It's interesting because Kojima actually approached Sakurai and asked him to include Solid Snake. Like, he straight up said, can you put Solid Snake in your game? This actually stemmed from the fact that Kojima's own son was a Smash Bros. Fan, and he wanted to be able to play as Snake in the game, so Kojima actually approached Sakurai. And this was actually back, I believe, when Melee was going to come out. So this was long before he appeared in Brawl, but Kojima was always open to sharing his character out into the world and having him appear in other stuff. Then he was able to be incorporated in Brawl and on. So the Wii U Brawl obviously was before that. And then you had the 3DS version and Ultimate. So Snake has been in there since then. But it's just interesting that Kojima himself approached them and said, hey, can you put my character in? I mean, Kojima loved this character.
Well, yeah, and you can tell by the games, like Metal Gear Solid, you can really tell that Kojima cares about the game, which is something that I noticed as we were playing through it on our Let's Play channel, actually.
Ooh,
nice
link in the
plug.
description down below, Degenerate Plays, where we played through the entire game together.
Nice. So yeah, I noticed that it's one of the few games that you can really tell that the developer actually cared about the game. Like, really cared. I know there's a lot of games where the developers care about it, but this is one where you can tell he really cared about his game. He really cared about the story. He really cared about all the characters. He took the time for everything to detail out every tiny little detail of the game, tiny bit of the story, even like characters' backstories. Even like minor characters got development.
And we see that too through all the optional codec calls that you can pretty much just skip. Or find, and these are going to be a staple for the entire series, from 1 onward. But the fact that you can have specific conversations with people like Mei Ling or Nastasha or any of these characters, Campbell.
Or Deep Throat.
Or Deep Throat, everyone's favorite character, Deep Throat, real character, look it up, not just a reference here. With all of these different optional discussions as well, and even like hidden details, like for example, how you can tame sniper wolves.
Yeah.
Wolves.
Wolves.
That's interesting. You know,
Right.
like there's a lot of hidden details to that too. You talked about that too with even the bosses in different areas.
Yeah, it's really revolutionary in the sense that each boss and also each area has unique strategies to the boss. Like my favorite one is Psycho Mantis. The idea that you have to literally plug in a second controller because Psycho Mantis can detect your movements on your controller, on the main controller, I think is pretty insane.
Yeah.
That this actually was a thing. And this wasn't even just a thing on like the PS5 or something. This was on the original PlayStation.
Yeah, and even to clarify that further, I'm not actuallying you here. But to
Well,
clarify that
actually-
even further, it's interesting because it wasn't just like plugging in a second controller even. It was like you had to switch
Right.
your like slot 1 controller to slot 2 because he could read your mind.
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool because that was a very character specific thing. By the way, never happened again in this entire game. It's not like some other character like Vulcan Raven was like, I too can read minds. It was just that was specific to Psycho Mantis, and he could even read your memory card on the original PlayStation. Like he would read your memory card. I'm just spitballing here, but he would seriously read your memory card, and if you had like, you know, a basketball game and a couple soccer games or something, he'd be like, I see you're a fan of sports games. Or if he saw that you had played Castlevania Symphony of the Night and some other stuff like that, he'd be like, I see you are a fan of Konami games. Things like that. He would straight up say that to you. Those lines were voiced. It wasn't just text.
Right.
They took the time to voice these different options for what he found. Again, very specific to that character.
Yeah, it's something that's pretty unique. And each boss has their own strategy and their own uniqueness to them in a way that it made every single boss in the whole game actually meaningful. And they actually were not repetitive, but they felt rewarding when you beat them. Like when you beat Psycho Mantis and you actually took the time to figure this out, it was very rewarding. Like you were like, wow, that was a great experience. I'm glad we took the time to figure that out and think about the battle and stuff like that. So
Yeah, Vulcan Raven would be different from Psycho Mantis, would be different from Sniper Wolf, and it just kind of went on and on.
yeah.
And even different rooms, like you said, were different strategies. Like, for example, I don't remember the name of this room, but when you're running up the tower to get to the roof, that is very, very different of a strategy than, say, if you bumped into a guy when you were just on solid ground, because you kind of are supposed to just keep pushing.
Right.
Which is very different from other parts of this game. Also really pissed us off, but
Yes.
definitely unique. You had more to say too about like just the gameplay with even the supplies that you're given.
Yeah, it's also pretty interesting that to add to the stealth factor to it and the you being alone on this island basically factor of it is the game did a great job with having you scavenge for supplies, actually, like rations, ammo, guns, stuff like that. And it made you actually try to tactically use them too. Like you didn't just want to waste all your ammo because you needed it. It wasn't just like the game threw in a ton of rations that it was actually not important. The game only gave you a specific number of rations and it was very low. So you had to actually be careful with what you're doing and
Yeah.
careful with where you're moving. And I found that pretty interesting too in the game.
Well, it feels like your failures are more based on you.
Yeah.
Now, there are parts of the game, like I said, like that tower that feel unfair, but if you wasted all of your rations and then you go to fight Psycho Mantis or you go to fight Sniper Wolf, why'd you waste all your rations? You know what I
Right.
mean? Like, it's less about, like, this game's unfair. It almost felt more Dark Souls-y in the sense of, oh, I blew through all of my items and I have no health now and I backed myself into a corner where if I lose, I didn't manage my inventory very well.
Right.
You know, other games would also go on to, I'm not sure if this was inspired by it, but I really do believe that there were other games that learned from this sort of mentality, like even the Resident Evil series with inventory management in the classic games, where it was like, hey, if you want to mess around and, you know, use up all your grenades and health kits, be our guest, but you're screwing yourself over.
Right.
You are controlling the difficulty of the game by your decisions, which I think is, again, unique. It's a bit... Now, listen, Metal Gear is not really like real life. It's pretty crazy. but it does remind you a little bit of the elements of real life where your decisions impact how difficult things might be.
Right.
You can really mess up and make things harder for yourself in these games. So I thought that was really interesting too, and
very inspirational to my personal life.
I know, I'm really trying to.
I'm a new man.
I'm setting the kids straight. The way to really know your life is going to be good is to subscribe to my Patreon. Link in the description down below. Now, even though it's considered a bit ugly now or polygonal, the large areas of this game were actually very impressive in this style of graphics, which even you noticed, and you are much more critical on old games than I am.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, you looked at this and even you were like, even on the main PlayStation, we played through this on PC where we fixed the aspect ratio and all this stuff, but even on PlayStation 1, where Nate and I actually tried this originally, he looked at it and could say, well, the PC version looks much better.
Right.
But this is impressive for a PS1 game.
Yeah, I was definitely pretty shocked about that, because like you said, I'm a lot more critical about old games. I think the graphics sometimes is very distracting for me, in the sense where everything's just looks terrible.
Okay, like for example, I'm not throwing you under the bus here, Final Fantasy VII.
Right.
One of my favorite games of all time. I find its looks to be a bit charming.
Yeah.
You, however, think it looks god-awful. And that's okay.
Yes. Yeah, it's to the point where it actually kind of like ruins the game for me. I know that's like very blasphemous to you because that's like your favorite game ever. But
I get that it's distracting.
Right.
It'd be like me watching a movie in 4:3 aspect ratio 240p.
Right.
I get it. It is distracting.
Yeah.
But I do think it's interesting that you were impressed by this.
Yeah. And I even played this game and I was actually shocked it was a PlayStation 1 game because it didn't look bad. Even like the original PlayStation version did not look that bad.
Right.
And I think that proves that this game was not like eons ahead of other ones, but it was definitely ahead of other PlayStation games at the time. In the graphics department as well.
Well, it's interesting how it was limited more by the tech of the PlayStation than the game design itself.
Right.
Usually game design at this time was also limited by game design. Look at something like Star Wars Demolition. Mm-hmm. I know that's like a very specific example, but it's like, oh, hey, let's obviously knock off, other games in this sort of Demolition Derby style. Let's just try and kind of rip that off a little bit and make our own thing, almost like Twisted Metal, but with Star Wars. But it's way worse. You saw a lot of that happening during that original PS1 generation of, hey, let's do what they're doing, but like a little different and maybe not quite as good, but we'll think it's as good. And with Metal Gear Solid, that wasn't a thing at all. I mean, it was just limited by the tech of the PlayStation, not by Kojima's vision or by what the developers actually put into the game. Again, you can see that, I know this is a bit of a plug, but on our Let's Play channel where we played through Metal Gear Solid 1, and
Link in the description below.
Link in the description below, Degenerate Plays, we played through on PC where we fixed the aspect ratio, used some fan-made patches and things like that to clear up the images, and it's not like we installed textures, really. We just cleared the game up, made it play in HD, and you can see how good it still looks despite its age.
Right.
I think that's very interesting. It's also worth noting that this game, just in general, would go on to inspire an entire Metal Gear Solid series beyond just Metal Gear, with MGS 2 through 5, multiple versions and ports of 2 and 3, and also several spin-offs and ports which would be created, such as Metal Gear Acid 1 and 2, and even Metal Gear Rising Revengeance, which shows just how popular and iconic this game, Solid Snake, and the world created by Kojima really were. So, Nate, what are your kind of final closing thoughts on this game?
One reason why it's special to me is just what game it was at the time when it was created. It was something that obviously they went on and perfected different aspects of in later games, but if you look at the game for what it was and just the franchise in general, it's definitely a very revolutionary and iconic game franchise. And to me, one of the things that makes it so special is not just the story, but the fact that the story is actually meaningful in every game. And it's not just a story. It's a game that's fun to play, but it also has a very great, in-depth, detailed story that you can tell that Kojima really put his heart into the game, and the franchise in general too. So I don't know. To me, that's kind of the biggest thing about what makes the game special for me is that it's just great.
It just works.
It just works.
Todd Howard here. Yeah, I think it's crazy how it revolutionized war games in general. Konami wanted him to make a war game, but Kojima went on to make almost a genre. It helped push the entire stealth genre forward as a proof of concept. This game series went on to release, like I said, many follow-up spin-offs, a remake in Twin Snakes, a rumored upcoming remake, and even fan projects and a upcoming movie with obviously Oscar Isaac being supposedly cast as Solid Snake. It's just a sprawling brand. I mean, Metal Gear is never really dead either. Now, I know this is a point of pain for some people, but it's even worth noting that this game franchise was so popular that it was converted into pachinko machines by Konami. Again, point of pain, I know, for some people. But this is something that has become iconic, that it's even essentially become what I would call a casino slot machine. Mm-hmm. This is everywhere. Everyone knows what Metal Gear Solid is, even if they haven't played it. You know?
Right. And everyone also knows who Snake is.
Yeah.
If you're even semi-involved in the gaming community.
Yes. So I think that those things are very fascinating and interesting about the game. They're some of what makes it special for us. And we'll definitely be talking, I believe, in the future about the rest of the franchise as well, and playing through a lot more of them over on the Let's Play channel. So be sure to check that out. Again, link in the description down below. We hope you enjoyed the video. If you enjoyed this, please be sure to let us know what you think in the comments down below. That helps us out a lot. Leave a like if you enjoyed it. Subscribe for more content. We appreciate you very, very much. And hey, you know what? While we talked about what makes the game special, nothing really needs to make you special to me, because you already are. You have yourself a fantastic day. And as always, everyone, stay shui. Also, thank you to all my patrons, especially my highest tier of patrons, Caleb, Michael, and Jonah. You guys are all appreciated so much. And the Patreon is home to a wide variety of exclusive content, including over 80, I believe it is actually over 90 now as the time of recording, or getting there, exclusive videos to only the Patreon. Some of those videos include, obviously, thank yous, but also behind the scene looks at different stuff we work on, as well as full cuts of things that couldn't make it onto YouTube, and even some very long videos that had to be cut down just due to time. So thank you for checking that out. I appreciate it very much. If you ever want to help support the channel, that is a great way to do so, along with leaving a like and commenting down below. You guys are invaluable, and I appreciate you so much. As I said earlier, have a fantastic day, and as always, everyone, stay shui.